Jieh-Yung.
How
How
are you,
are
Andrew? Great to meet you. Virtually?
you? Virtually. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in Melbourne, sitting in my office, my empty office.
Empty office.
So it's a bit of a ghost town down here in Melbourne CBD, as
Yeah.
Victoria at the moment, Melbourne specifically, Metro Melbourne, but also now Victoria in stage 4 lockdown.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately recorded the highest amount of infection cases today, with over 700 cases, a record for Australia.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we've also heard about a number of deaths as well, due to the COVID pandemic. Hats off to the government and the public service, and also to our health professionals, and the ADF and the Victoria Police for just doing a top-notch job in making sure that the spread doesn't go any further. So really appreciative of their efforts.
100%. Yeah. Even though you're doing it tough
Where are you?
right now.
You're in Sydney, aren't you?
I am in Sydney. Yeah. Well, we are quite lucky at the moment, but hopefully, fingers crossed that in Melbourne and Victoria it improves, and then hopefully we can all have all the borders open again and travel again. But yeah, hopefully things look up for a little bit. But yeah,
a little bit. I'm a little, reality has sort of struck in a little bit in terms of Melbourne and Victoria being isolated from the rest of the country. I'm a little bit, miffed of the fact that Queensland has taken the AFL Grand Final for the first time in 100 years. It's a little bit hard to face to that reality. So, but no doubt that Queensland will do a good job as well. But it's just not the same, the AFL Grand Final not being at the MCG. So things are changing rapidly, as you know, Andrew. So I guess we'll just have to sit tight and work together, and hopefully we can see it through.
Yeah, at this point, nothing really surprises us anymore, I think. Everything
Absolutely.
is just...
Oh, maybe when Melbourne hosts the NRL Grand Final.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Well, there's talk about potentially having the Grand Prix move to another state, or even
Adelaide.
The Melbourne Cup. They can move those two events, in my opinion. Not a big loss to me, but for the AFL, really, it's just pretty hard for a Melburnian to swallow.
That's it.
Not having the AFL in Melbourne. So but here we are.
Here we are, mate. well, thank you so much for coming on to my podcast today. And for the people out there who don't really haven't met you before, would you like to give a little quick introduction about who you are, what you do, what you studied, and what you're currently doing right now?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, Andrew, thanks for the opportunity just to chat and to connect. A really great initiative that you're doing with this podcast in connecting with Colombo Plan scholars and also alumni, but also the wider community as well, about the importance of our diplomacy and soft power engagement in the region. It's really leaders like yourself, emerging leaders like yourself, that will help take Australia forward. So really excited to be able to connect with you and your colleagues, and your fellow alumni and fellow scholars as well. As for me, mate, my name is Jieh-Yung, as you've announced a little bit earlier. I'm currently the inaugural director of the Centre for Asian Australian Leadership at the Australian National University. So in short, we call it CAL. So CAAL. We're all about acronyms here at ANU, and CAL is short for our new centre. It was established in January of this year by our Vice Chancellor, Professor Brian Schmidt, and also initiated by the former Chancellor of the ANU, current Distinguished Honorary Professor, the Honourable Gareth Evans, and also myself. We initiated the idea of CAL, and the purpose of CAL is to address the underrepresentation of Asian Australian representation in senior leadership positions. Now, we know, based on some statistics, that Asian Australians constitute 12 to 30% of the Australian population. But when it comes to representation in senior leadership positions across the public sector and the private corporate sector, it's pretty much between that 1 to 2%. to the 3% mark. So not exactly reflective of the overall Australian community, not exactly reflective of where the community is headed in terms of the diversity makeup of our population. And we feel that there's a large part of the community that does not get the opportunity to set the agenda, to help lead Australian institutions into the next phase of growth and prosperity. We also feel that Asian Australians have very unique skill sets, experiences, networks and abilities that could help Australian institutions thrive, not just within Australia, but also across the region in the Asia Pacific and the Indo-Pacific. Asian Australians are a fantastic resource for Australia to help Australia advance its soft power agenda in the region, and we feel that Asian Australians are not being given those opportunities, hence the purpose of CAL. The ANU itself, being the Australian National University, is particularly committed to diversity and inclusion and equity. ANU is doing some amazing work at the moment across Indigenous health and Indigenous reconciliation, and also work with our First Nations people, doing some fantastic work around gender equality and gender representation and leadership as well. Now we add a third pillar to that diversity and inclusion component, which is cultural diversity, specifically focusing on Asian Australians. A very large population, as I mentioned before, that doesn't get that representation. So I've been really busy over the last couple of months building up CAL. CAL, as I mentioned, is still a very new institution, so there's been quite a lot of work being done behind the scenes to build up the groundwork and also confidence within the Asian Australian community, but also the wider community around our purpose. So certainly with COVID, it's thrown a real spanner into the works, and also because of some of the after effects of COVID-19 in relations to COVID-19 inspired racism directed towards Asian Australians. It's really put Asian Australians at the forefront of the social and political debate, especially around the issues of racism and discrimination. So we really believe that CAL's work is more important than ever to help working with our leaders and our authorities and institutions to help remove racism once and for all. That's been keeping me pretty busy for the last couple of months.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I guess to take a step back before that, and how did you actually get into this role? I do know a bit about your background and how you led into this role, but like starting from university, you studied arts, and I guess from there, what steps was it serendipity, or was it very planned and calculated to actually how you got to where you are today?
Oh, look, Andrew, I've always been interested in public service. I've always been interested in public policy and in politics. When I was 8, my dad bought me a history book, from the Royal Melbourne Show, a history book about, a summary of 3,000, 4,000 years of world history into the one book. Reading that book really sort of changed a lot of my perspectives and given me a real love for history, philosophy and politics. In terms of our family as well, I've got, grandparents and ancestors who've been involved in the military during their time in China. They've been involved in revolutions, specifically the Xinhai Revolution of 1911. My great-grandfather was involved in that movement. My father was a Vietnam War veteran. Our family's got a real sort of sense of pride around public service, which is why I was interested in the humanities and I was interested in public policy. I did do the Asian thing though, Andrew. I did do the Asian thing, and that is when I was going through high school, I attended to do, we call it VCE here, you call it HSC over there, year 11 and 12.
All the sciences.
I attended to do the science. We call it the Asian 5. So it's 2 maths, 2 sciences and accounting. So I did do that in year 11 and failed dismally in all 5 of those subjects, and then had this epiphany during my transition from year 11 to 12 and made the decision to take on humanities instead. And I have to say that decision paid off. I was very, proud to have been accepted into Melbourne University, which was the university I was keen to go to during my year 12, and took up a single Bachelor of Arts degree at University of Melbourne. Although, did get a little bit of pressure from my Asian friends about the need to do commerce or law, but I certainly didn't get enough marks to do law or commerce. I could have done commerce at another university, but chose to stick with a Bachelor of Arts at Melbourne University. And, it was really, 3 or 4 of the best years of my life in terms of, studying Bachelor of Arts and obviously, being involved in the Melbourne University community. And also just what I love about the arts degree is the flexibility to pick your own majors, the ability to choose your subjects and your electives, and really to sort of like learn a whole bunch of different things during your time at university. But the one thing that an arts degree teaches you is that resourcefulness and that flexibility. And I really appreciate that. And that's sort of stuck with me for the majority of my career.
What was your favorite subject at university?
Good question. Favorite subject was I have to say Asia Pacific politics was my favorite subject. There was a subject also on Asia Pacific diplomacy that was quite interesting as well. Chinese politics was very interesting. I did Chinese politics. I did American politics. Believe it or not, I actually found Chinese politics more easy to understand compared to American politics. So, ironically, isn't it? And also, just the whole combination of just the ability to create your own major and also, research and do assignments on topics of interest. I think that's what's really great about an arts degree, and I really cherish that. And despite the government's latest announcements, I would still think for our young people who are thinking about moving into university over the next couple of years to really think about that arts degree, because it does allow you to be flexible, to be resourceful, and most importantly, it allows you to adapt to any situation in any industry as well, because it gives you those basic skills of critical thinking, problem solving, and analysis. Not to mention the ability to write well, and also to to absorb information as well. So I really, really, really recommend it.
100%. Yeah, I am also an art student, and that's for myself.
If you're better than me, right? You've got a commerce degree, don't you?
But that's for my family. That's for my family. And, it's just really fascinating to see both sides of both the commerce students, but also art students, and what we both learn from each side. I'm sure you're probably not missing a lot of the accounting or statistics or finance subjects that you could have done if you did a commerce subject. But
it's really interesting. Like when I was doing my arts degree, Andrew, I was one of the very few Asian Australians in the room. I mean, most people in an arts degree. I'm not sure about now. It's been a while.
It's pretty much sort of the same. It's sort of the same.
You reckon? Yeah. Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Like when I went through university in the early 2000s, I stood out. It's very unusual to see an Asian Australian, or someone of Asian heritage doing an arts degree. Commerce degree, you really feel like you're in an Asian university. When you walk into a lecture hall, you just sort of see, it's just very, very, not really representative of the overall university makeup. And law, you get a mix of both, and engineering, you get a mix of both. But really, with arts, you really do stand out. But it's interesting because a lot of people like to attach an arts degree to another degree because it gives them that sort of sense of difference, as you mentioned. What are you doing in arts?
I'm doing government and international relations.
Government and international relations. Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and
commerce. What are you doing in commerce?
I'm doing management and international business. Did you get the theme?
No, so a lot of my Asian friends, when they went through commerce, right, they started off with actuarial studies, and then it got too hard, and then they did finance. That they didn't enjoy. Then they moved to accounting, and then when they really want to shake things up, they take on marketing, management, and international business. But look, I think that's a very good. It's a very good complement to your arts degree. So I think it's definitely a really good choice there. So, and you're in your final semester?
Final semester. Hoping to graduate. Hopefully I will get a ceremony. I'm not sure if you've seen on LinkedIn with a lot of the graduates recently. Everyone's just getting their degrees in the mail and posting their photos in front of the gardens instead of the university lawn. but hopefully everything will work out, and hopefully I'll get a nice graduation ceremony next year.
Yeah, fingers crossed, mate. Because I think it's a real sort of a real achievement in your life, and it's one of the happiest moments in your life. A real sort of opportunity just to celebrate everything that you've learned, and also that transition into your professional career. But I really hope that you'll get get a ceremony, put that hat on. That's the one thing at Melbourne Uni we didn't get, and that is a hat. Undergraduates don't get hats, only postgrads do. So you had more standard on trying to get your hair right before you sort of take it. But I remember during my graduation, I was actually beaming because that was the day that I found out that I got an interview with DFAT because one of my earlier career aspirations was to be a diplomat. I've always wanted to represent Australia abroad. I think it's probably one of the biggest honours that anybody could have, with the exception which I actually see it on the same path as the Olympics in terms of representing your country abroad, being a diplomat and being being an ambassador or a high commissioner. I think it's a true honour, and that was something that really sort of resonated with me. But unfortunately, I didn't get through to DFAT. So found out a couple of weeks later that I didn't make it through the rounds, unfortunately. But my career took a different turn after I didn't sort of enter the diplomatic service.
Yeah. Did you have I guess a little bit of a Quarterlife Crisis? Shout out to my friends who actually run a podcast around Quarterlife Crisis. But
Quarterlife Crisis.
Quarterlife. There we go.
Quarterlife Crisis.
Yes. Did you have that when you were graduating, and because obviously you went into I guess the public sector with the local council around your area, but was there ever a sense of doubt or worry when you did graduate, or that you wouldn't be able to find out or know what you wanted to do?
Good question. I think the one thing that I really did learn was the ability to just adapt and actually be resourceful and not be disappointed just because I wasn't able to achieve something. I mean, I was disappointed not being able to get through the DFAT rounds. Some people said to me, if you had a law degree, it might give you a better chance. I don't know whether that's an urban myth. I'm not sure. That doesn't mean that the single degree people working at DFAT now,
That's right.
to be there. But certainly, of course, they do. For me, my career took a different road. So after not being able to enter DFAT, because in terms of the public service, I had my heart set on DFAT. So you can imagine the disappointment when it didn't happen. So what happened then was my sort of destiny took a bit of a turn, because I ended up getting a job with the group called the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria. Now, as a policy officer, and they are the peak body that represents multicultural Australians in Victoria. So it was an advocacy group. It was a not-for-profit group. So I had to quickly pick up skills that I didn't really have, which was advocacy and lobbying and policy development. But spending time there actually set off a career path for me. And not long after that, I was elected onto the city of Monash, which is a very large metropolitan municipality here in Melbourne, mainly in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. It currently has over 200,000 residents, so it's not a small council. I was elected at the tender age of 23, so very, very young, and only scraped through in terms of my election. I didn't win by a landslide. It was just got through thanks to the preferential system, and really, getting on to council was actually a real sort of career changer, because I had to mature quickly. I had to pick up leadership skills. I had to grow more confident in a short period of time, because people look towards you for direction, and they look towards you as an example of leadership. So I had to sort of quickly change and adapt and grow up. And, my wife would say that during that time, you actually matured very quickly, and you sort of had to, because you're in that position. So, and in that position, I learned a lot about, governance. I learned a lot about the importance of setting policy agendas, making decisions, not actually just doing it, but actually making them. And decisions that you make actually affect, the everyday lives of residents and ratepayers who live in the area. And so a huge responsibility on our shoulders. But it was also that moment where I came face to face with the bamboo ceiling for the very first time. You know, where people sort of like didn't see me as a serious leadership contender, or whether people didn't take me seriously because of who I am, or the inability to pronounce my name. Therefore, they weren't willing to ask me for my opinion because they couldn't pronounce my name, believe it or not. And so, you know, the need to actually build up your confidence to people and actually prove yourself. I had to prove myself 3 times more than an Anglo-Australian counsellor or a European background counsellor. You know, I mean, I had to prove myself, you know, time and time again, and even more. And I think, you know, that was really when I first came face to face with the bamboo ceiling. And because of those experiences, Andrew, it's really been a lifelong mission to actually break this ceiling down, you know, break it down for your generation, for my daughter's generation, for the next generation of Asian Australians who are wanting to achieve their aspirations. You know, like, and I feel like, you know, for us, we are probably at that pivotal moment where if we break it, it will be much easier for the next generation to step up without prejudice, without discrimination, and without unconscious bias. So it's because of those experiences that has made me a lifelong advocate to break this ceiling down. And that has sort of brought me into the current role with Cal at the ANU is how do we actually come up with ways to break these obstacles down for Asian Australians?
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned one point was to actually develop your confidence. I think that was just the biggest obstacle for me, not only just in academics, but also in professional life and in personal life. And I feel like whenever I was speaking, just through my personal experience, I just felt like I wasn't heard as much as some other people. And I think perhaps it was also me just not being able to speak loud enough and just not having that self-belief in myself. But I hope I gained a little bit more confidence over the years and gained through that experience. But was that something that you felt was something that is a cultural sort of dynamic, or is that confidence is something that you need to really build because everyone else has it, and you just really need to just really go with that? If that makes sense.
Very good question, Andrew. Because and you know, thanks for sharing that experience with me, because I was exactly like you, you know, when I was at university, in terms of feeling that, you know, we are not being heard, and what do we have to do to actually make ourselves get heard? Do we have to do something different? I see it as a mixture of both, actually. A little bit of cultural upbringing in terms of, you know, how growing up in a very Chinese sort of family, you know, we were sort of like taught to, you know, head down, bums up, you know, like just stay focused and actually not cause trouble or not make a scene. You know, if you focus, if you study hard, you will be able to get there. And that's a very strong Asian belief in terms of you need to study, you know, you need to do well at school. Therefore, you know, having a good education will lead to greater prosperity and more opportunities. Parts of that is true, absolutely, but there are other parts of it also. You know, living in more of a Western society, you know, things are done differently, you know, and sometimes you do need to speak loudly. Sometimes you do need to, and that's the one thing that Asian Australians don't do a lot, and that is to showcase their achievements. You know, we're proud of our achievements internally. We're very proud of what we've done, but we don't actually showcase it or share it with the world as well as others. You know, I said this to somebody the other day that, you know, we need to be like, you know, peacocks, where we have to show our plumage, you know, like every now and then, you know what I mean? Like we have to, you know, like, or a male lion showing their mane a little bit, you know, like we have to do that sometimes so people know what we've done and what our abilities are, what potential we have. So I really think it's a mixture of culture, but also the environment as well, because there are barriers within workplaces. There are barriers within sort of communities and institutions. Absolutely. There is also, you know, a lot of unconscious bias, a lot of ignorance, I would call it, a lot of, you know, misinformation, you know, and there's also need for a lot of education that needs to happen as well between colleagues about what are the stereotypes? How do we actually combat the stereotypes? How do we actually break that down and provide a platform and provide a more inclusive workplace where everybody can be heard? You know, if you are, for example, you know what I mean. You know, you've worked in real estate a little bit. You know, for a lot of those, you know, real estate agents who speak Chinese, they are only allowed to deal with Chinese-speaking clients. Why is that? You know what I mean? Like, why can't they deal with everybody else? You know, it's great that they can speak Chinese. It gives them a competitive edge, but that shouldn't be the only thing that they do. So how do we actually, you know, break down those stereotypes as well? I think it's a combination of two parties. You know, the system needs to accept that leadership is different, that leadership itself is inclusive and leadership itself is diverse. And we can't use the one form of leadership to assume that everybody has those skills. So, you know what I mean? Like, we can't really say that, oh yeah, this is how leadership works, therefore everybody needs to have those skills. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Leadership itself needs to be inclusive, it needs to reflect diversity. So that's the system. But also individually, like you and I and other Asian Australians who might be listening to this conversation, it's also up to us to step up as well. Step up, give it a go. You know, sometimes, yeah, you might fall over, but that's how you learn. That's how you learn to walk and run, right? If you don't fall. So I think it's important for us to give it a go and just take on that Australian mantle of, you know, just take a shot, give it a go. So, yeah.
100%.
So, yeah.
Have you gotten better at actually showcasing your achievements? Because when you said that, and I just super really resonated with me, because I feel like, I guess I was taught to sort of blend in and just keep your achievements.
Be modest.
Be modest. That's the word. Be very modest about everything that you do. Never be loud. I think there's a Chinese saying, I'm sorry if I'm butchering it, but I feel like it feels like the loudest duck or the loudest chicken gets
shot. The loudest duck gets shot. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, modesty is also another strong part of Chinese and Asian culture. You know, that we need to be modest and we need to be humble and show some empathy, humility. You know, and I think they're important too, because without those attributes, you know, sometimes leadership could actually fall off a little bit and they lose track. So it's important to have those attributes as well. But at the same time, you know, when you're trying to, I guess, make an impact, when you're trying to, you know, present yourself, sometimes you need to be a little bit more showcasing of your abilities. And, you know, as again, going back to the peacock analogy, you know, you got to flash your plumage, you know, like, and show that, you know, this is what you're about, and these are your achievements. There are different ways of doing it. I think there are subtle ways of doing it. There are more sort of like in your face ways of doing it. I guess it really depends on the situation, and also depends on who you're talking to as well. So, but yeah, don't be afraid. Yeah, exactly right. Make sure it's natural, and don't try and do something that you're uncomfortable with doing. It's actually about finding your niche and finding how you want to best communicate. Some people use LinkedIn, you know, some people, you know, put all their awards on LinkedIn or all their publications on LinkedIn, which is great. And some people will just use platforms like this, you know, and tell people what they've done, you know. So it really depends on the situation, but I do think it's important to actually include that in your repertoire when you're actually presenting yourself to new stakeholders and to networks. So it's something that we need to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Sometimes I do think about, if I was actually born in, let's say, a predominantly Asian country. Let's say I was born in Vietnam or born in Singapore, where the population is the majority of Asian descent or Asian culture. Is there, obviously the concept of the bamboo ceiling is very applicable, I guess, and more so understood in a Western society. But is that something that actually Asian countries recognize, despite having the leaders being predominantly Asian? Or is that something that is we feel that is a construct, or is something that is gets created from within, I guess, Western culture or Western society?
I think that's a very, very good question, and very complicated as well, because there are scholars that are trying to sort of break this down a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess the difference between a country like Australia compared to you know, a country like Malaysia, for example, is that one of Australia's greatest values is its multiculturalism, the ability to celebrate your cultural heritage within an Australian setting. And I actually think that we underestimate that ability. Like Australia has gotten that relatively well compared to most countries, you know, in terms of understanding that. And also because Australia is far more diverse compared to some of these countries as well.
Yeah.
You know, we've got, I think, over 200 people from over 200 ancestries that make up Australians, and Australians speak over 100 different languages and, you know, follow hundreds of different faiths as well. So I don't think there's any country in the world that boasts that level of cultural diversity. So I think it's for a comment like, you know, for a concept like the bamboo ceiling, you know, it resonates well with Australia because you've got a large population in Asian Australians that is not represented at all. You know, not in our parliaments, not in our business boardroom, not in our, not-for-profit boards, you know, like, or media, you know, you don't see a lot of it there. So, so I think it really resonates well with countries like us, but also the US as well. They're probably doing a little bit better than us when it comes to representation, but still, you know, from a population ratio standpoint, probably not there either.
Yeah.
But then again, that's not to say that Asian countries don't have representative problems as well. You know, countries like Singapore and Malaysia, you know, they've got very large minority groups that aren't represented either in politics and in business. You know, there's also some, you know, issues around racism within China with the African community in China. So it's not to say that these countries don't have these issues, but I think Australia is more advanced in this space. But also it gives us an opportunity to actually capture this competitive edge compared to our competitors. Japan, another example, very monocultural. You know, Japan's got issues around, you know, dealing with people of mixed heritage. I think Naomi Osaka was a clear example. You know, obviously with her mixed heritage, it took a while for her to prove herself to Japan. Her winning a couple of Grand Slams certainly helped that. But that also proves, you know, like how important it is that people with diverse backgrounds have these skills, you know, and when they do break through, you know, that it's a natural process where they get embraced by their home country or their native country. So I think Australia has a lot of potential to actually, you know, help lead the world in actually embracing cultural diversity. If we get it right, we can actually, you know, provide a model for other countries to follow. And I also think that we're actually quite advanced compared to other countries as well. So in answer to your question, I think, it resonates more with more of an Australian, US, UK audience rather than an Asian country. But that doesn't mean that they don't have problems. They absolutely do. But it's probably not at that level that they're able to actually institute policies or changes within institutions to kickstart that. So I think we are ahead of the game here.
No, that's a great point. I think because Australia, we do pride ourselves on the diversity. So I guess we should actually showcase that. And yeah, that's a really good point. You mentioned Naomi Osaka, but do you have any other examples of actually people breaking this barrier, or just like success stories that you've sort of studied and heard of? Like I know, I guess Crazy Rich Asians is the one that just it goes off the top of my head, where there's like the biggest breakthrough in Hollywood with like an Asian-led cast. But is there anything like to you, I guess maybe less known, but it really does actually has a very strong impact?
I think I'm not sure about being less known there, Andrew, because you know, Crazy Rich Asians was, as you mentioned, phenomenal in terms of being the most, you know, the most anticipated, but also most successful rom-com, believe it or not, to actually, you know, generate, you know, a strong profitability. And also, you know, it was groundbreaking in itself. You know, the cast itself was, you know, mostly all sort of Asian, but obviously it's still got that criticism of not representing Singapore well because the South Asian community wasn't particularly represented. So even within diversity, there's problems as well, right? But here in Australia, I mean, like growing up, certainly, you know, and I'm sounding like a very sort of like more senior person saying this or not saying this, you know, growing up in the 80s and 90s, Andrew, there really wasn't many role models in Australia. Right. There isn't really any sort of, I mean, there was, you know, you know, the Empress of Diversity herself, Lillian Chin, you know, like she was obviously a bamboo ceiling and glass ceiling smasher. during my time growing up. But there certainly wasn't many leading chins. So I didn't have many role models, growing up. So I looked towards overseas, and the one person that really had a lot of impact on me growing up was Bruce Lee. In terms of and I couldn't relate to Bruce Lee because, him growing up in a English-speaking country, him having Chinese heritage. So his movies, I think, really sort of set the path for a lot of diversity within Hollywood and within that sort of filming industry. Breaking all stereotypes, right? Asians weren't just the sidekick, or weren't just the enemy, or the victim, or
the maths nerd.
Oh, exactly right. Or the math nerd, or the numbers man, or you know what I mean. Bruce Lee really broke down those barriers in terms of how he portrayed, himself, but also people of Asian heritage in his films. But in terms of moving back to modern times, I'm not sure whether you caught that MasterChef episode with Instant Noodle. That was phenomenal. Wouldn't you agree? That was just, seeing that on TV, very nostalgic. All of a sudden I was going through my my pantry to find out whether I've got that particular instant noodle or not. And wanting to share what my favorite childhood instant noodles were, and also, sorry about that, bit of a blackout. I had a phone call coming in. In terms of me wanting to share the type of instant noodles that I wanted to, that I ate when I was a child. So, but also celebrating that Asian Australian culture on Australian TV was groundbreaking. So seeing that was really brought a tear to my eye. Seeing that our contribution is being showcased, but also being recognised, and not to mention the great culturally diverse contestants that came on MasterChef, and the great thing about that is they weren't there because of tokenism or because they wanted to put a couple of Asians on TV.
Because the cooking is amazing.
They were there for their skills. They were there for their skills and their expertise and their abilities as a chef and as a professional. So they were there in their own right, and they were recognised for that, and that was phenomenal in my view. So kudos to MasterChef really to actually break that ceiling. But also, at the same time, the ability to share our culture and heritage and connect with a new audience really took off. Twitter really took off, Facebook took off, social media took off, and just seeing people just connecting and responding, it was phenomenal. So I think that was a really pivotal moment in terms of representation. But I think there are some very good things coming up as well in terms of that sort of diversity being portrayed in the media. So exciting times ahead, really. It's good to see it being showcased at such a high level. Yeah.
I think I did get a glimpse or the end of Bruce Lee's career in his movies. But for me, it was more like Jackie Chan and Jet Li.
Yeah, Jackie Chan. Yeah.
And Jet Li. Yeah, I think it's just really interesting just to see a male Asian, or just an Asian protagonist that really led the movies, and that you could actually see yourself being the protagonist or the hero of your own life or your own movie. I think that was very powerful.
It's a powerful thing, isn't it? You're able to relate to that and connect to that. And sometimes it's, even if you don't understand the Chinese language or the dialect, right, you just feel a connection there. So, representation is really powerful. And I certainly got a glimpse of that during my time on local council when I was a councillor, and also being a former deputy mayor, right? Within our council, we had a very large Chinese Australian population. I think over 15 or 20% of the ratepayers were of Chinese heritage. And me being on that council, they actually felt an instant connection. They felt that they could come to you for advice or come to you for ideas, come to you because they want to contribute to the well-being of the city, right? And never before have they ever they said to me one time, they've never contacted a politician. They've never contacted a council officer. And this is the first time because I'm there. So I think representation is a really important thing. And I guess it's really hard to measure academically, but I think from a practical standpoint, it is real and it is important.
Wow. No, a lot to process there, mate.
Well, I think we're still, I think we're getting there in terms of the focus on cultural diversity leadership. It's still, for a lot of people, it might be a new concept, but for a lot of us who've been, batting away at this for decades. I mean, it's not new, but I think we should be doing it differently. And I think there is a great opportunity for Asian Australians to help provide strong, inclusive leadership to help Australia navigate through the pandemic, and also help Australia to find new markets, connect new opportunities, set up new partnerships. And I think I really do see an opportunity for Australia to better connect with the Asian region. I think Asian Australians have an important role there to do that. And certainly that's been examined at the moment through the Asia Task Force led by the Business Council of Australia and Asia Society, with PwC and your University of Sydney, involved in that. Cal is also involved in that piece of work as well, looking at how Asian Australians and the Australian diaspora can help Australia better connect with the region. So work is taking place, and obviously the focus around the Colombo Plan and ensuring that there is a diverse cohort of young leaders that reflects modern Australia, and to build those networks, but also build those skills for the future. I think it's happening already. So, you being a clear example of that, and so many of your other fellow scholars being from diverse backgrounds as well. So I'm optimistic. I think, that we could have institutions and leadership teams that reflect modern multicultural Australia, but it will take time, and it does, and these things do take time. And hopefully when it's your time to take on those leadership roles, it will be far easier for you than me. So fingers crossed.
Just looking back, when you did graduate, if you were just to walk out of university tomorrow, what advice would you tell yourself as you navigate through, I guess, your professional life, but also understanding what you know now, navigating all the, I guess, unconscious biases and obstacles that weren't so apparent to you? What would you tell yourself back then so that you could possibly do a better job, or also just be a lot more comfortable with how you operated?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think first and foremost, I would say to myself, it's important to be authentic. Be who you are. Don't be somebody that you're not. When you are authentic and real, people tend to gravitate towards that, because, and that's something that I've always had. I never sort of gave up my Chinese name. I've always had Jieh-Yung as my name. I didn't sort of take on an English name despite pressures from people when I was running for election to change the name because people won't vote for me because of that name. They just think that I can't speak English. So I didn't actually give into that. So I'm pretty proud of that. But if there's anything that I would say to myself when I walked out of university, is to, number one, to be authentic and be who you are. But secondly, also take more risks. I think it's important to try, and actually, even if you know that you might fail, still give it a go. I do regret not doing enough travel, as coming out of university. So I think, I guess it's really sort of like hard for me to provide that advice now. But certainly I think, if the opportunity does arise, I think traveling really does provide you with some really good insights, to the world around you, and also help build that self-confidence and belief as well. But also, I think most importantly is to be more louder as well. I wasn't as loud as I was now, and maybe if I was more louder, that I would have progressed some of these issues a bit further. So, be loud and proud, be authentic, be real, and be more confident is what I would say to myself if I stepped out of university. But that's certainly the piece of advice I want to give to our young ones and our emerging leaders coming out of uni now, is to do exactly that. Yeah.
No, 100%. I think definitely be authentic to yourself. I think it is quite easy for, I guess, Asian Australians to just fall in line and just to take the predetermined, predestined sort of path, whether you become a doctor, go on to a very conventional, I guess, legal profession or business profession. But I think it is taking risks. I think is something that a lot of these people can actually really do well in, and I think not enough risks are actually taken with this.
And you raise an interesting point there, Andrew, because it's really about, I guess it's built into our DNA and into our psyche, into taking a career path that is stable, that's able to generate, profit and also a comfortable life. My parents are really supportive in what I'm doing, but my in-laws still don't have a clue of what I do. You know what I mean? They still tell me to do a law degree and become a lawyer. They're like, hey, if you understand policy and understand politics, you should go be a lawyer or become a judge or something. So I think, I understand that for a lot of Asian Australians, they do get that pressure as well. And also it's because it's been ingrained in you when you were growing up. But I think it's important to note that, that's not always the end goal and the end zone as well. Like, there's ample opportunities for you to, not just do something different, but actually creating something within that field as well. Be innovative, be creative, see where the gaps are, find your niche. But most importantly, do something that you really, truly enjoy. If you love being an accountant, all power to you, right? So it's really about, making sure that you enjoy what you do, and that you can sort of, do something that could actually just get you up in the morning and actually, motivate you to go to work. You know what I mean? With a smile, with some confidence and things like that. So I think it's, again, going back to that sort of advice about being real and being authentic. Just, if you find your passion earlier on, fantastic. But some people might find their passion when they're in their late 30s and their late 40s. That's what Confucius said, really. Like, an individual doesn't really fully grasp their skills and their abilities and their wisdom until they hit their mid-30s. So, so it's never too late to actually find out what you really want to do, and it's never too late to pivot either. So, but most importantly, it's just to enjoy it. So, and not put too much pressure on yourself.
No, thanks for those. I was asking because I wanted to get your advice, so I was just.
Well, mate, you're doing some really interesting work at the moment, obviously with the Colombo plan, with your podcasting. You've obviously dabbled in real estate, and you've dabbled in banking a little bit. I think it's great. To try a whole bunch of different industries and different workplaces, and work with different people. But you'll realize, one day it'll just snap. That this is this is the one thing that you really want to do. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. I think it's, at the moment, just enjoy university, enjoy that flexibility, enjoy that sort of openness, I think. So whatever you want to do will come to you. Even if it's in your mid-30s, mate, don't worry. So there's some of us that are still trying to work out what we want to do, and I'm one of them. So
that's right. No, I really do appreciate your time, and everything that you're doing right now around Asian Australian leadership is obviously it's applicable to me directly as well. But it's incredible that just to see the work and the progress as I guess unfolded over the years, and just to understand what my parents went through when they first came here, to understanding after multiple decades to see what the progress has been. So I'm really looking forward to what work that you do, and also the future leaders and the future generation, and see how they actually do as well.
Well, Andrew, I always tell people that we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for the next generation, but also for our children and their children. But at the same time, we're doing it for Australia as well. I think Australia is very unique in terms of having that diversity within our ranks. I always tell people that the richness of Australia is not what's in the ground, and it's not what we dig up and export to other countries. It's not just our agricultural products or our natural resources. It is in our people. The people that we export to the world, the people that are making a tremendous contribution within Australia, but also outside of Australia on behalf of Australia. We're really doing this for Australia. And I think if Australia is able to fully grasp its diversity, really there's no barrier that would be more difficult for us. So as you mentioned, progress has happened since our parents' generation, since their arrival to Australia. But it's still, we still have a long way to go. But it takes the combination of us, Asian Australians, but also non-Asian Australians to actually help us push to break down these barriers within organisations, to call out unconscious bias, to call out racism, because we can do it. We can easily do it, but it also takes those who are non-Asian Australian to join forces with us to do it, because it's not about, it's not about taking our slice of the pie or taking their slice of the pie. It's about growing the pie, making sure that everybody has their fair share. And I really believe that. And I think, we're optimistic that change can happen. We see that with gender. It has taken a couple of decades, but they're at a point right now where governments and businesses are being criticised for not being gender diverse. It can make or break an organisation's reputation just because they're not gender diverse. We want that same thing for cultural diversity, and we'll get there, I think. So, and hopefully by the time when all barriers come down, we can really see Australia at its best. And I appreciate the opportunity to share that with you and to connect with your listeners and your stakeholders. And I wish you nothing but the best, mate. I think, it's unfortunate that you are grounded at the moment, not being able to go to your country of choice as part of the Colombo plan. But, it's a great program, and hopefully you get the best out of it. And hopefully it will take you to many more new opportunities in the near future. So thank you.
No, thank you so much for coming on and just sharing your insights. And I do look forward to speaking to you, let's say maybe in 20 years' time, and see where the progress has gone. It will be a good catch up.
When you are perhaps, like High Commissioner of Australia or Prime Minister.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, man. And all the best with everything in Melbourne. Hopefully the situation gets a lot better. And I definitely look forward to seeing your work as well.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. And my best to you and to your family, and stay safe and be well.
Thank you.